The year is 1945. The United States and Japan are at war in the Pacific. The warpath is narrowing closer to Tokyo after the Allied victory in the European theater. President Harry S. Truman is faced with the decision of how to swiftly and efficiently end World War II. Option 1 would be the amphibious landing on mainland Japan, which would sacrifice hundreds of thousands of American lives in an event 10 times larger than the D-Day invasions of Normandy. In August 1945, Truman and the United States decided that to avoid this invasion plan, they would need to look elsewhere, the Manhattan Project, ultimately deciding to drop 2 nuclear weapons on the Japanese Empire at Hiroshima and Nagasaki, killing hundreds of thousands of Japanese citizens and military personnel, ultimately ending World War II. The unconditional surrender of the Japanese armed forces would occur in the Potsdam Declaration on July 26, 1945, with official documents signed on September 2, 1945, aboard the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay, the alternative for Japan being a prompt and utter destruction by the United States. Shortly after the Potsdam Conference, General Douglas MacArthur was tasked with overseeing the United States' occupation of Japan in the Indo-Pacific region. MacArthur would enact widespread military, political, economic, and social reforms across the country. The post-war occupation and rebuilding of Japan was essential to the United States, with an emphasis on growth and stability. The United States promoted New Deal policies to help rebuild their economy, pushed for labor rights and unions, and enacted reforms for the education system in the country. During this occupation, the United States and Japan would eventually begin to freely share technology, which would simply edge Japan to becoming a manufacturing giant, while also creating a democracy for the Japanese people, allowing them to vote and hold elections for the very first time. Essentially, the American occupation of post-war Japan and their massive financial support launched the country into one of the biggest economic recoveries in history. Today, Japan has the third largest GDP at $5.6 trillion. It is the fifth largest exporter in the world. Despite the results from the end of the war, after nearly a decade, the US and Japan would turn from adversaries to allies. Additionally, the two countries share a mutual security assistance pact, which provides both countries with military protection in the event of a foreign attack, signed by Japanese Prime Minister Yoshida in San Francisco in 1951. In the wake of World War II, the United States would see great benefit in the continued occupation of Japan. The United States' perception of international threat had changed completely during their occupation from 1945 to 1952. The idea of a rearmed and militant Japan no longer triggered alarm for U.S. officials. Instead, the real threat appeared to be the creep of communism spreading out of Asia. Japan proved to be a pivotal point of operation during the Korean War, becoming the principal supply depot for UN forces. This action quickly assured Japanese leadership that no matter the state of its military, no threat would be made against Japanese soil. Currently, the United States has an immense presence of military personnel in Japan. The U.S. has over 60,000 active duty service members, more than any other country, used to deter the aggressive nations which reside as close neighbors to Japan. To this day, the threat of North Korea is a massive factor into the alliance, with Washington and Tokyo focusing more closely on their missile defense systems following North Korean missile tests rising in recent years. The U.S.-Japan bilateral economic relationship is also one of the United States' strongest and overall advanced partnerships when compared to other allies in the world, due to substantial trade and investment by both countries. Other than economic interests, the U.S. has utilized the Japanese island as a basis for military operations in a major capacity. With more than 85 U.S. military facilities in Japan, the U.S. uses this foothold as a way to mediate activity in the Indo-Pacific, specifically with China's military rise, despite Japan's close economic relationship with China. The rise in militaristic capabilities has raised concerns, specifically in Taiwan. Chinese behavior towards Taiwan called for Japan to defend in the event of war. The U.S. Defense Secretary and Japan's Defense Minister agreed that Tokyo and Washington would cooperate and mediate closely under any such conflict. The Japanese and United States client-state relationship is one that was formed from ashes and has turned into one of the most powerful economic militaristic alliances in the world.